Poor little girl shelters Millionaire and his Mustang during flood, not knowing he's her dad. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. 10-year-old Lily Jenkins trudged through the school gates, her worn sneakers squelching with each step. The holes in her soles had turned into tiny wells, collecting every puddle she couldn't avoid on her walk home through the narrow streets of Portland's east side. "Mama, I'm home," she called, pushing open the door to their cramped studio apartment. The paint peeled from the walls like old skin, and the radiator coughed its familiar wheeze. Eleanor looked up from where she knelt beside their rickety kitchen table, counting coins with methodical precision. At 34, her hands bore the evidence of endless hours scrubbing office floors and restaurant kitchens. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she managed a tired smile for her adopted daughter. "How was school, sweetheart?" "Mrs. Peterson said my building drawing was the best in class again," Lily announced proudly, pulling a crumpled paper from her backpack. The sketch showed an impossibly detailed skyscraper, complete with architectural flourishes that seemed far beyond a child's imagination. Eleanor's heart clenched as she looked at the drawing. Lily had been sketching buildings since she was 5, always with that same uncanny precision. "It's beautiful, baby. Why don't you put it on the refrigerator?" As Lily carefully arranged her artwork, Eleanor discreetly slipped the eviction notice deeper into her purse. 3 days. They had 3 days before they'd be on the street. The $8 to $47 in coins and crumpled bills wouldn't even cover half the rent they owed. That evening, after a dinner of canned soup stretched with crackers, Eleanor tucked Lily into their shared bed. The little girl's breathing was slightly labored, another worry that kept Eleanor awake at night. Without health insurance, even a simple cold felt like a crisis waiting to happen. When Lily finally drifted off, Eleanor retrieved a faded photograph from beneath her mattress. A young man with striking blue-gray eyes and an easy smile stared back at her. Jackson Wright, the architectural student who'd promised her the world, then vanished without a trace 10 years ago. He'd never known about the pregnancy, never known about the miscarriage that followed, never known about Eleanor's desperate decision to adopt Lily 2 years later, when she'd found the abandoned infant at the women's shelter where she volunteered. Eleanor pressed the photo to her chest and whispered a prayer into the darkness. "Please just give us a chance. Give her a chance." Outside, storm clouds gathered over Portland, and the first drops of what would become the worst flood in 50 years began to fall. The weather sirens wailed across Portland as the worst storm in decades descended upon the city. Rain hammered the streets with biblical fury, turning gutters into torrents and low-lying areas into lakes. Jackson Wright gripped the steering wheel of his cherry-red 1967 Mustang, his knuckles white with tension. The meeting with potential investors had been a disaster. They'd called his latest project too risky, too idealistic. At 42, he'd built an empire on calculated risks, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like failure. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. Flash flood warnings in effect for all of downtown Portland and surrounding areas. Residents are advised to seek higher ground immediately. Jackson cursed under his breath as he navigated through Eleanor's neighborhood, taking what he thought was a shortcut to the highway. He'd driven these streets before, years ago, when he was young and foolish and in love with a waitress who believed in his dreams. Suddenly, a wall of brown water rushed around the corner like a living thing. Jackson slammed the brakes, but it was too late. The current caught his Mustang and spun it sideways. The engine sputtered and died as water began seeping through the door seals. "No, no, no!" Jackson frantically turned the key, but the engine was flooded. Water was rising fast. Already up to his ankles inside the car, his phone showed no signal. Panic seized him as the current pushed the car toward a storm drain. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could barely make out a building with a lit window on the first floor. "Help!" he shouted. Though he knew no one could hear him over the storm, then impossibly he heard a voice, young, clear, cutting through the chaos. Mister, over here." A small face appeared at the window, a little girl with determined eyes waving frantically. Behind her, A woman's silhouette hesitated before joining the child at the window. "Come on," the girl called. "You can make it." Jackson looked at his submerging car, then at the window barely 15 feet away. It was his only chance. He took a deep breath and opened the door, immediately swept toward the building by the current. The last thing he saw before being pulled under was the little girl's face, full of fearless certainty that everything would be all right. Eleanor's heart pounded as she watched the stranger struggle against the rushing water. Every instinct screamed at her to stay safe, to protect Lily, to not get involved. But her daughter's unwavering determination made the choice for her. "We have to help him, Mama." Lily pressed against the window. "He's gonna drown." "Lily, get back," Eleanor started, but the man's head disappeared beneath the muddy torrent. Without thinking, she cranked open the old window and leaned out. "Here, grab my hand." Jackson's fingers found hers just as the current threatened to sweep him past the building. Eleanor pulled with strength she didn't know she possessed, her shoulder screaming as she hauled the soaked stranger through their window. He collapsed on their threadbare carpet, coughing up muddy water and gasping. Eleanor quickly shut the window against the storm while Lily stood transfixed, staring at the man who just crashed into their world. "Thank you," Jackson managed between ragged breaths. I thought I was done for." Eleanor wrapped her arms protectively around Lily, studying the stranger. Even drenched and disheveled, everything about him spoke of wealth, from his expensive watch to his tailored shirt, now ruined by floodwater. "I'm Jack," he said, deliberately omitting his famous last name. Something about this humble apartment, with its hand-drawn pictures taped to peeling walls, made him want to be just a man, not Jackson Wright of Wright Developments. "Eleanor, this is Lily." She gestured toward her daughter, who continued staring with unabashed curiosity. "Your car's really pretty," Lily announced. "Like in the movies. Is it going to be okay underwater?" Jackson followed her gaze out the window, where his Mustang sat half submerged, looking like a red island in the churning flood. "I don't know, sweetheart. Probably not." Eleanor noticed how naturally he spoke to Lily, without the condescending tone most adults used with children. "I'll get you some dry clothes. My neighbor left some things here before he moved." As she rummaged through a small closet, Jackson looked around the apartment. It was tiny but meticulously clean. Children's artwork covered every available wall space, and not just any drawings. These were architectural sketches that would impress a professional. "Did you draw all these?" he asked Lily. She nodded proudly. "I like buildings. Mama says I'm going to be an artist when I grow up." Jackson felt an odd flutter in his chest, a recognition he couldn't quite place. The battery-powered radio crackled with grim updates. "The National Weather Service has extended the flood warning through Thursday. Emergency shelters are at capacity. Residents are urged to remain in place until waters recede." Eleanor stared at their nearly empty pantry, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. 3 cans of soup, a sleeve of crackers, and half a loaf of bread. Hardly enough to feed 3 people for potentially days. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, stirring the thin vegetable soup she'd stretched with extra water. "This is all we have." Jackson, now wearing an oversized flannel shirt and jeans that hung loose on his frame, shook his head. "Don't apologize. I should be thanking you for saving my life." The truth was, Jackson couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten anything that wasn't prepared by a chef or ordered from a 5-star restaurant. But as he tasted Eleanor's simple soup, something unexpected happened. It was the most comforting thing he'd ever eaten. "This is incredible," he said, genuinely amazed. Eleanor looked at him skeptically. "It's just canned soup." "How do you not know how to cook?" Lily piped up, incredulous. "You're a grown-up." Jackson laughed. A real laugh, not the polished chuckle he used in boardrooms. "I've been asking myself that same question. I can design buildings, but I can't even make scrambled eggs." "That's silly," Lily giggled. And for the first time, since Jackson's arrival, Eleanor's face softened into a smile. As night fell, they arranged makeshift sleeping areas. Eleanor insisted Jackson take the couch despite his protests. The worn cushions sagged under his weight, and he could feel springs poking through the fabric, a far cry from his custom Italian mattress at home. But lying there in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet breathing of the mother and daughter who'd saved him, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt safe. "Jack?" Lily's whisper cut through the darkness. "Yeah? Are you scared of the water?" Jackson considered lying, giving her some brave adult answer. Instead, he found himself being honest. "A little. Are you?" "Sometimes. But Mama says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Jackson closed his eyes, wondering when he'd stopped doing the right thing, when he'd stopped being brave. Morning light filtered through the water-stained windows as Eleanor slipped out to check the flooding in the building's lower levels. The water had risen another foot overnight, making evacuation impossible. Jackson found Lily at the small kitchen table, completely absorbed in her drawing. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her concentration. But what he saw made him stop breathing. The sketch showed a towering residential complex with flowing curves and green terraces, architectural details that would challenge a graduate student. But it wasn't just the technical skill that stunned him. It was the vision. The building seemed to breathe on paper, designed for families, for community, for life. "Lily," he said softly, "this is extraordinary." She looked up, pencil still poised, over the paper. "You think so? I see them in my head sometimes, like they're already built somewhere." Jackson's throat tightened. He remembered being 7 years old, sketching buildings that existed only in his imagination, his father dismissing them as pointless daydreaming. "Would you like to learn some tricks that might help?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Really?" Her eyes lit up. Jackson showed her how to create depth with shadow, how to suggest texture with simple lines. His hands guided hers as she refined the perspective of her building's entrance. "Like this?" Lily asked, adding delicate details to the facade. "Perfect. You have a natural gift, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you it's not important." They worked together in comfortable silence, two artists separated by decades but connected by the same inexplicable need to create. Jackson found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't since childhood, before business school had taught him that dreams were liabilities. When Eleanor returned, shaking rain from her coat, she stopped short at the sight of them hunched over the drawing, together. Something about their posture, the way they both tilted their heads at the same angle when concentrating, sent a chill down her spine. "The building manager says we're stuck here until Thursday at least," she announced, her voice carefully. "Neutra." "That's okay," Lily said without looking up. "Jack's teaching me about architecture. Did you know buildings can tell stories?" Eleanor's eyes met Jackson's over Lily's head. For a moment neither spoke, but Eleanor saw something in his expression that made her heart race with a terrible possibility. I should start lunch," she stammered, turning away before he could see the recognition dawning in her eyes. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened their last can of beans, her mind reeling. During lunch, she found herself stealing glances at Jackson and Lily, her worst fears crystallizing into undeniable truth. It wasn't just their shared passion for architecture. They both had the same habit of tapping their fingers when thinking. They both wrinkled their noses when concentrating. But most damning of all were their eyes, the same rare blue-gray with a distinctive amber fleck on the right side. Eleanor had spent 10 years looking into those eyes every day, never connecting them to the faded photograph hidden under her mattress. "So, Lily," Jackson said casually, "tell me about your family. Do you have your mom's artistic talent, or does it come from somewhere else?" The innocent question hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Lily, unaware of the tension, shrugged. "Mama adopted me when I was little. She says my birth parents probably weren't ready to take care of a baby." Jackson's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Adopted? My real dad was probably some dreamer who built castles in the air but didn't want to build a real family." Lily repeated Eleanor's long-rehearsed explanation with childish frankness. Jackson choked on his water, coughing violently. Eleanor watched his face pale as the words sank in. Words she'd said in anger years ago, never imagining they'd one day be repeated to their target. "Are you okay, Jack?" Lily asked, concerned. "Fine," he managed. But his eyes found Eleanor's across the table. In them, she saw dawning recognition and something that looked like guilt. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. He couldn't know. There was no way he could connect a 10-year-old girl to the pregnancy she'd never told him about, to the miscarriage that had broken her heart, to her decision to adopt Lily 2 years later. But as Jackson continued staring at Lily with growing intensity, Eleanor realized she might be wrong. Those eyes, their eyes, were unmistakable. "I should clean up," Eleanor said abruptly, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Jackson caught her wrist gently as she reached for his plate. "Eleanor, can we talk? Privately?" The amber fleck in his right eye seemed to glow as he looked at her, and Eleanor felt the walls of her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. "Later," she whispered, pulling free, "when Lily's asleep." But she wondered if there would be any secrets left to tell by then. The floodwaters showed no signs of receding, trapping the unlikely trio in their makeshift bubble of domesticity. Eleanor found herself teaching Jackson the most basic life skills: how to wash dishes without breaking them, how to fold clothes properly, how to stretch ingredients into filling meals. "I've never had to do any of this," Jackson admitted, awkwardly wielding a dish towel. "I went straight from my parents' house to having assistants handle everything." Eleanor watched him fumble with a simple task most people mastered as children. "What kind of life is that?" "A successful one, I thought." Jackson paused, considering, but maybe not a real one. That evening, after Lily fell asleep on the couch, Eleanor and Jackson sat across from each other at the small table. The apartment felt different in the lamplight, more intimate, more honest. "I was adopted too," Eleanor said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Car accident when I was 12. The system failed me in every way possible until I aged out. That's why I adopted Lily. I know what it's like to have no one." Jackson leaned forward. "You did that alone? Raised a child by yourself?" "Someone had to. She was abandoned at the shelter where I volunteered. 2 years old, barely speaking, scared of everything." Eleanor's voice softened. But so brilliant. Even then she was drawing pictures that made no sense for her age. "And her father?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Like I said, he wasn't ready for the responsibility of family. Some people are better at building empires than building relationships." Jackson winced at the barb, even though he didn't fully understand why it cut so deep. "I have 3 houses," he found himself confessing. "Penthouse here, beach house in California, mountain cabin in Colorado. But you're right, none of them are homes." "What happened to you?" Eleanor asked. "You used to talk about designing affordable housing, about architecture that served communities instead of just profit." Jackson's head snapped up. "How do you?" He studied her face in the lamplight, something nagging at the edge of his memory. Eleanor realized her mistake too late. She'd revealed too much, remembered too much. "Lucky guess," she said quickly. But Jackson was already looking at her with new recognition brewing in those familiar blue-gray eyes. By Thursday morning, the floodwaters had finally begun to retreat, leaving behind a landscape of mud and debris. Jackson's phone buzzed incessantly as the cell towers came back online. "Mr. Wright!" His assistant's panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "Where have you been? The Henderson deal fell through, the board meeting was postponed, and there are 17 reporters trying to reach you about the flood damage to the downtown properties." Eleanor froze at the kitchen sink. Wright. Jackson Wright of Wright Developments, the name plastered on half the luxury buildings in Portland. The same name from the faded photograph hidden under her mattress. "I'll be there in a few hours," Jackson said curtly, ending the call. When he turned around, Eleanor was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Wright Developments," she said flatly. "You're that Jackson Wright?" "Yes." He waited for her reaction, the usual fawning or gold-digging behavior he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, Eleanor turned away, her shoulders rigid with tension he didn't understand. Outside, A tow truck arrived to extract his Mustang from the receding waters. The engine was ruined, but Jackson found he cared less about the car than about leaving this small apartment that had somehow become more comfortable than any of his mansions. Lily appeared at his elbow, holding a carefully folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Jackson unfolded the drawing and his breath caught. It showed a beautiful apartment building with gardens and playgrounds, designed for families who couldn't afford luxury but deserved dignity. At the bottom, in careful letters she'd written, "A place where people like us could live without paying too much." "Lily, this is." Jackson's voice cracked. "This is the most important blueprint anyone's ever given me." "Really?" Her face lit up. "Really?" Jackson knelt to her level. "Can I keep this? It might change everything." Eleanor watched the interaction with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. He was so natural with Lily, so genuinely moved by her gift. How could the same man who'd abandoned his pregnant girlfriend be so tender with a child he barely knew? As Jackson prepared to leave, he turned to Eleanor. "I want to repay you somehow. The hospitality, saving my life. Let me help you." "We don't need your charity," Eleanor said coldly. Jackson flinched at her tone. "It's not charity. It's gratitude." But Eleanor had already retreated behind her walls, the brief connection of the past 3 days crumbling as the floodwaters receded, taking with them the illusion that Jackson, right, might be different from the man who'd broken her heart a decade ago. Jackson's penthouse felt like a mausoleum after the warmth of Eleanor's tiny apartment. 600 square meters of marble and steel stretched before him, every surface polished to perfection, every piece of furniture positioned with calculated precision. He wandered from room to room, feeling more alone than he had in years. In his home office, surrounded by architectural awards and photographs with politicians and celebrities, Jackson spread Lily's drawing across his drafting table. Her vision haunted him. Affordable housing that didn't sacrifice beauty for budget, communities built for families instead of investors. During board meetings, he found himself sketching variations of Lily's design in the margins of financial reports. His partners noticed his distraction. "Jackson, are you even listening?" Margaret Chen, his business partner, asked during a presentation about their latest luxury development. "What if we built something different?" Jackson said suddenly. "Something for working families, teachers, nurses, people who make the city run but can't afford to live in it." The room fell silent. Then nervous laughter began. "The flood must have hit you harder than we thought," someone joked. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor clutched the eviction notice with shaking hands. The official red stamp made it final. They had 48 hours to vacate. Her desperate job search had yielded nothing but closed doors and polite rejections. At Riverside Park, Lily played on the rusty swings while Eleanor sat on a bench, counting their remaining money for the 100th time. Lily's cough had worsened since the flood, a dry hack that kept them both awake at night. "Mama, are we gonna be okay?" Lily asked, her voice hoarse. "Of course, baby. Mama always finds a way." But that night, alone in their bed, Eleanor pulled out the faded photograph of young Jackson Wright. Now she knew with absolute certainty. The man who'd shared their meals and slept on their couch was the same one who'd promised to love her forever, then disappeared when his father demanded he abandon his foolish romantic notions. She'd never told him about the pregnancy. The miscarriage had come just weeks after he'd vanished, and by then she'd been too heartbroken and proud to seek him out. When she'd adopted Lily 2 years later, she'd chosen to give the girl Jackson's last name as a secret reminder of the family they'd never be. Now Lily burned with fever, and Eleanor wept silently into her pillow, torn between rage and desperation. The emergency room at Portland General Hospital buzzed with controlled chaos as Eleanor rushed through the automatic doors, carrying Lily's limp form. The little girl's fever had spiked to 104 degrees, and her breathing had become labored and shallow. "Please, someone help us," Eleanor called out, her voice cracking with panic. A triage nurse quickly assessed Lily's condition and immediately called for a gurney. "What's her medical history?" she asked as they wheeled Lily toward an examination room. She's healthy, just a cough that got worse after the flood, Eleanor said, jogging alongside the gurney. We don't have insurance. Good insurance, I mean. Just emergency Medicaid. The nurse's expression remained professional, but Eleanor caught the subtle shift in her eyes. She'd seen that look before. The calculation of what they could afford to do versus what needed to be done. Dr. Martinez, a kind-faced pediatrician, examined Lily thoroughly. She has pneumonia, likely from exposure to contaminated floodwater. We need to admit her immediately and start aggressive treatment. What does that mean? The treatment? Eleanor asked, though she dreaded the answer. Antibiotics, chest x-rays, possibly a CT scan if she doesn't respond quickly. The medication alone will run several $1,000s, and that's before we factor in the hospital stay. Eleanor's legs nearly gave out. Several $1,000s might as well have been several million, isn't there? Isn't there something less expensive? Dr. Martinez looked at her with genuine sympathy. Mrs. Jenkins, your daughter is very sick. Without proper treatment, this could become life-threatening. Eleanor sank into the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Lily's bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with obvious effort. Lily's normally bright eyes were glassy with fever, and she barely stirred when Eleanor took her small hand. Meanwhile, across town, Jackson paced, his office unable to concentrate on the quarterly report spread across his desk. Lily's drawing was pinned to his wall, and every time he looked at it, he felt that strange pull, as if something important was just beyond his understanding. He picked up the sketch again, studying Lily's signature in the corner. Lily J. Wright. The last name had puzzled him since he'd first noticed it. Wright wasn't exactly uncommon, but combined with her obvious architectural talent and those distinctive eyes. A cold chill ran down Jackson's spine as fragments of memory began connecting. Eleanor's bitter comments about dreamers who built castles in the air, her knowledge of his past ideals, the way she'd looked at him when she learned his identity, not with surprise, but with recognition tinged with pain. And Lily. 10 years. Old, those eyes, that uncanny architectural ability that seemed to come from nowhere. Jackson's hands shook as he did the math. 10 years ago, he'd been in love with a waitress named Eleanor. His father had discovered the relationship and threatened to disown him if he didn't end it immediately. Jackson had been young, scared, and weak. He'd chosen the family business over love, disappearing from Eleanor's life without explanation. Could Lily B. Jackson grabbed his keys and raced from his office, his mind reeling. He had to find them, had to know the truth. But when he arrived at Eleanor's apartment building, he found their unit empty, a bright orange eviction notice taped to the door. "Excuse me?" he called to a neighbor loading boxes into a truck. "The woman and little girl who lived here, do you know where they went?" The elderly man shook his head sadly. "Eleanor and little Lily? Poor things got evicted yesterday. Heard the girl took sick real bad too. Eleanor mentioned something about the hospital before they left." Jackson's heart stopped. "Which hospital?" "Portland General, I think. That's where all the flood victims been going." Jackson ran back to his car, his mind racing faster than his feet. If Lily was his daughter, and the mounting evidence suggested she was, then she was lying in a hospital bed while he lived in luxury, oblivious to her existence. The drive to Portland General felt endless. Jackson burst through the ER doors, his expensive suit drawing curious glances from the waiting patients. "I'm looking for a little girl, Lily Jenkins. She was admitted today," he told the receptionist breathlessly. "Are you family?" Jackson hesitated. Yes. I'm her father." The words felt strange in his mouth, but also somehow right. The receptionist directed him to the pediatric ward, where he found Eleanor asleep in an uncomfortable chair beside a small bed. She looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn with worry. In the bed, Lily lay still as a doll, an IV line snaking from her tiny arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging above her head. Jackson approached quietly, his heart breaking at the sight. Even in sleep, Lily's breathing was labored and her cheeks were flushed with fever. Eleanor stirred as if sensing his presence. Her eyes opened slowly, then widened in shock and anger when she saw him standing there. "What are you doing here?" she whispered fiercely, glancing at Lily to make sure she was still sleeping. "I came too." Jackson's voice failed him. Now that he was here, faced with the reality of Lily's illness and Eleanor's obvious distress, he didn't know what to say. Eleanor stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You came to what? See the results of your abandonment? Came to witness what happens when people like us don't have your money and connections. Eleanor, I don't understand. Don't you?" Eleanor's voice was barely controlled, years of suppressed anger and pain finally bubbling to the surface. "Look at her, Jackson. Really look at her." Jackson's gaze moved from Eleanor to Lily, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The eyes, the talent, the timing, it all made horrible, perfect sense. "She's mine," he whispered, the words barely audible. "Now you see it," Eleanor said bitterly. 10 years too late, but congratulations on finally figuring it out. Jackson felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "You never told me, you never said you were pregnant." "How could I?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "You changed your phone number, moved out of your apartment, disappeared like I never existed. How was I supposed to tell you anything?" Jackson stared at her, memories flooding back. His father's ultimatum, his cowardly decision to cut all ties, rather than fight for what he wanted. "Eleanor, She's not even your biological daughter," Eleanor continued, her voice trembling. "I lost the baby. Lost your baby 3 months after you left. But when I found Lily at the shelter 2 years later, abandoned and scared, I gave her your name because I thought maybe somewhere out there, you deserved to know what it felt like to have a daughter, even if you'd never meet her." Revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. Eleanor had lost their child, then chosen to honor that lost connection by giving another abandoned child his name. The gesture was so heartbreaking, so generous that Jackson couldn't speak. "And now she's sick," Eleanor whispered, sinking back into her chair. "And I can't afford to save her. The doctors want to run more tests, try stronger medications, but I don't have thousands of dollars, I don't have anything." Jackson looked at Lily again. Not his biological daughter, but somehow his daughter nonetheless. The little girl who'd saved his life, who shared his passion for creating beautiful spaces, who'd given him a glimpse of the man he used to be. "What do you need?" he asked quietly. Eleanor looked up at him suspiciously. "What? What does she need? The tests, the medications, what will it cost?" "I'm not asking for your charity, Jackson." "This isn't charity," Jackson said firmly. "This is responsibility, and it's love." Eleanor stared at Jackson for a long moment, her defenses warring with desperation. Lily stirred in the hospital bed, her small hand reaching out unconsciously. Eleanor immediately took it, feeling how hot and fragile her daughter's fingers were. "The specialist wants to run a bronchoscopy," Eleanor said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "They think there might be debris in her lungs from the floodwater. The procedure alone is $8,000 plus the extended antibiotic treatment, plus the ICU monitoring they're recommending." Jackson pulled out his phone without hesitation. "Dr. Martinez, right? I'll speak with him immediately." "No," Eleanor's voice was sharp. "You don't get to waltz in here and play savior after 10 years of nothing." "Then what do you want me to do?" Jackson's voice cracked with frustration and pain. "Let her suffer because of my past mistakes?" Eleanor's composure finally shattered. "You want to know what I want? I want you to have been there when I was 19 and pregnant and terrified. I want you to have been there when I miscarried our baby alone in a hospital room, with no one to hold my hand. I want you to have been there when I worked 3 jobs, to pay for my own medical bills, when I lived in my car for 2 months because I couldn't afford rent." Jackson felt each word like a physical blow. "Eleanor, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "You were too busy becoming the man your father wanted you to be. Too busy building your empire to notice the collateral damage." "You're right." Jackson's admission was quiet but firm. "I was a coward. I chose the easy path and it cost us everything, but Lily doesn't deserve to pay for my failures. Eleanor, wiped her eyes, glancing at Lily, who was beginning to stir. She's not your responsibility, Jackson. I made the choice to adopt her, to give her your name. That was my decision, not yours. Maybe not legally, Jackson said, moving closer to the bed. But she saved my life, Eleanor. Not just from the flood, from becoming someone I couldn't live with. When she handed me that drawing, when she looked at me with such hope and trust, I felt like the person I used to be, the person you once believed in. Lily's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with fever. Mama? She whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm here, baby. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. Lily's gaze shifted and found Jackson standing beside the bed. Despite her illness, her face lit up with a weak smile. Jack? You came back. I did, sweetheart. How are you feeling? My chest hurts, Lily admitted, and I keep coughing up yucky stuff. Jackson felt his heart clench. This brave, talented little girl who'd shown him kindness when she had nothing to give was suffering, and he had the power to help her. Lily, Eleanor said gently, Jack wants to help us pay for your medicine. Would that be okay with you? Lily looked confused. Why would he do that? He doesn't even know us that well. Eleanor and Jackson exchanged a meaningful look over her head. The moment of truth had arrived, but Eleanor wasn't ready for it. Because, Jackson said carefully, sometimes, when people help each other, they become family, not by blood but by choice. Lily considered this with the seriousness that children bring to important concepts. Like how Mama chose me even though I wasn't born to her. Exactly like that, Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Jenkins, I have the results from Lily's latest chest x-ray. We really need to discuss the treatment options. Jackson stepped forward. Doctor, I'm Jackson Wright. I'll be handling all of Lily's medical expenses. Please proceed with whatever treatment she needs. Dr. Martinez looked surprised but pleased. Excellent. In that case, I'd like to start the bronchoscopy this afternoon. We've also consulted with a pulmonary specialist who thinks Lily would benefit from a hyperbaric oxygen treatment to help clear the infection more quickly. Whatever she needs, Jackson said firmly. As Dr. Martinez left to arrange the procedures, Eleanor stared at Jackson with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Why are you doing this? Because she matters, Jackson said simply. Because you both matter. Because 10 years ago I made a choice that hurt the person I loved most, and I've regretted it every day since. You don't know what you're saying, Eleanor protested. You don't know us. Not really. This isn't some romantic movie where everything gets fixed with grand gestures. You're right, Jackson agreed, but it's a start. And maybe if you'll let me, I can try to be the man you once thought I could be. Lily had been listening to their exchange with growing concern. Despite her fever, she picked up on the tension between the adults. Are you guys fighting because of me? She asked, her voice small and worried. No, sweetheart, Eleanor said quickly, smoothing Lily's hair back from her forehead. We're just trying to figure some things out. Jack, Lily said, turning to him with her penetrating gaze. Are you going to disappear again when I get better? The question hit Jackson like a lightning bolt. In a child's simple words, she'd identified his greatest fear and his greatest temptation. It would be easy to pay for her treatment, ensure she recovered, and then return to his comfortable, disconnected life. I don't want to, he said honestly. But that's not really up to me. It's up to your mom. Lily looked back and forth between the two adults, her young mind working to understand the complex emotions swirling around her hospital bed. Mama, she said finally, remember what you always tell me? That sometimes people deserve second chances if they really want to change? Eleanor felt tears threatening again. Trust her wise daughter to cut straight to the heart of the matter. Remember, Eleanor whispered. Maybe Jack deserves a second chance too, Lily suggested, then closed her eyes tiredly. I'm sleepy now, but when I wake up, I want you both to be here. Okay? Eleanor and Jackson looked at each other across Lily's bed, both shaken by the child's simple wisdom. Neither spoke, but something shifted in the space between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. As Lily drifted back to sleep, Eleanor finally answered Jackson's earlier question. "The bronchoscopy is scheduled for 3 o'clock, she said quietly. "If you're serious about being here, she'll be scared. She'll need us both." Jackson nodded, understanding that Eleanor had just offered him something precious and fragile, a chance to prove himself when it mattered most. He wouldn't waste it this time. 3 days later, Lily's condition had dramatically improved. The bronchoscopy had successfully removed the contaminated debris from her lungs, and the hyperbaric oxygen treatments had accelerated her healing beyond the doctor's expectations. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her distinctive laugh once again filled the hospital room. Eleanor watched from the window as Jackson taught Lily to play chess on a magnetic travel set he'd brought from home. He'd barely left the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair when Eleanor insisted on taking shifts, bringing them meals from the cafeteria, and somehow managing to make Lily smile even during the most uncomfortable medical procedures. "Checkmate," Lily announced triumphantly, moving her queen into position. "You're getting too good at this," Jackson laughed, studying the board. "I think you inherited the strategic thinking gene." Eleanor stiffened at the casual reference to genetics, but Lily just grinned. "Mama says I'm too smart for my own good. Sometimes." Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway with discharge papers. "Well, young lady, it looks like you're ready to go home. Your lungs are clear, your fever's been gone for 24 hours, and your oxygen levels are perfect." "Really?" Lily bounced excitedly in her bed. "Can we go home now?" Eleanor's smile faltered. Home. They didn't have a home to return to. The eviction had been final, and their belongings were in a storage unit she could barely afford to keep. Jackson noticed Eleanor's expression immediately. "Actually, Dr. Martinez, could we have a moment? There are some logistics we need to discuss." After the doctor left, Jackson turned to Eleanor with careful determination. "I have a proposal." "Jackson, no," Eleanor said quickly, recognizing the look in his eyes. "Just hear me out," he insisted. "You and Lily need a place to stay. I have more space than I could ever use. Come stay at my place, temporarily, until you find something permanent." Eleanor's defenses shot up immediately. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" Lily piped up, looking between them. "Jack's house is probably really nice, and we don't have anywhere else to go, do we, Mama?" Eleanor's cheeks burned. She'd tried so hard to shield Lily from the reality of their homelessness, but children were perceptive. "We'll figure something out," Eleanor said firmly. "We always do." "Eleanor," Jackson said gently, "this isn't charity. It's me trying to do the right thing. Let me help you get back on your feet." "And what's the catch?" Eleanor asked suspiciously. "What do you expect in return?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, then looked directly at Lily. "I'd like the chance to get to know Lily better, to be part of her life, if she wants me to be." "Like a dad?" Lily asked with startling directness. The question hung in the air like a live wire. Eleanor felt panic rising in her chest while Jackson looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Jackson struggled with his words. "I'd like to be someone you can count on. Someone who's there when you need help, or when you want to share something exciting, or when you just want to play chess." Lily considered this seriously. "But you're not my real dad, right? Because Mama adopted me." Eleanor and Jackson exchanged a loaded glance. The conversation was veering into territory neither felt prepared to navigate. "That's right," Eleanor said carefully. "But sometimes people choose to be family, even when they're not related by blood." "Like you chose me?" Lily said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And maybe Jack is choosing us too?" Jackson felt his throat tighten. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm choosing you, both of you, if you'll let me." Lily looked at Eleanor expectantly. "Can we, Mama? Can we give Jack a chance?" Eleanor felt trapped between her daughter's hope and her own fears. She'd built their life around independence, around not needing anyone, around protecting Lily from the kind of abandonment she'd experienced. But looking at her daughter's eager face, she realized that maybe her own fear was becoming Lily's prison. There would have to be rules, Eleanor said slowly, hating how desperate she sounded but seeing no alternative. Clear boundaries. This would be temporary, just until I find work and save enough for our own place. Of course, Jackson agreed immediately. And you don't get to make decisions about Lily without consulting me first. I'm still her mother. Absolutely. Eleanor took a deep breath. And you don't get to tell her about us. About our history. Not until I'm ready. Jackson nodded, though something flickered in his eyes that suggested this condition might be harder to maintain than Eleanor hoped. And if you hurt her, Eleanor continued, her voice turning steely, if you make promises you can't keep or disappear when things get complicated, I will make sure you never see her again. Do you understand? I understand, Jackson said solemnly. And Eleanor? I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm asking for the chance to earn it. Lily clapped her hands together. So we're going to live in a mansion? Jackson laughed. It's not quite a mansion, but it's definitely bigger than what you're used to. There's a room that would be perfect for you. It has big windows where you could set up a drawing table. Lily's eyes went wide. My own room? With space for drawing? Your own room, Jackson confirmed, then looked at Eleanor. And your mom would have her own space too, of course. Complete privacy and independence. Eleanor felt herself wavering, a safe place for Lily to recover, a chance to find decent work without the desperation of homelessness hanging over her head. Time to figure out their next move. Okay, she said finally, the word coming out like a sigh. But this is temporary, Jackson, don't forget that. Temporary, he agreed. But the way he looked at Lily suggested he was already hoping for something more permanent. As they gathered Lily's few belongings to leave the hospital, Eleanor caught Jackson's reflection in the window. He was watching Lily with such tenderness, such protective affection, that it took her breath away. For a moment, she could see the young man she'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, the one who dreamed of creating beautiful spaces for families to grow and thrive. But then she remembered how that young man had chosen his father's approval over their love, and she steeled herself against hope. People didn't really change, she told herself. They just got better at pretending. Still, as they walked out of the hospital together, Jackson carrying Lily's drawings while she skipped between them, chattering excitedly about her new room, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change in ways none of them could predict. Jack, Lily said as they reached the parking garage, when we get to your house, will you teach me how to draw buildings that touch the sky? Jackson smiled, hefting her artwork under his arm. I'll teach you everything I know, sweetheart. We'll design buildings that don't just touch the sky. We'll make them beautiful enough that the sky wants to touch them back. Eleanor watched this exchange with mixed emotions. She'd spent years protecting Lily from disappointment, but maybe she'd also been protecting her from wonder. Time would tell which instinct had been right. Jackson's penthouse felt like stepping into a different universe. Lily pressed her face against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mesmerized by the city sprawling below them like a living map. Is that our whole city down there? She whispered in awe. Most of it, Jackson said, enjoying her wonder. On clear days, you can see all the way to Mount Hood. Eleanor stood frozen in the marble entryway, clutching their single suitcase. Everything gleamed, from the Italian leather furniture to the crystal chandelier that probably cost more than she'd earned. In her entire life, she felt like an intruder in a museum. Lily, don't touch anything, she said sharply. Jackson frowned. She's fine, Eleanor. This is your home now. Both of you. Temporary home, Eleanor corrected, but her voice lacked conviction as she watched Lily explore with careful reverence. Over the following weeks, they settled into an uneasy routine. Jackson left early for work but returned each evening with groceries and an eagerness to help with dinner. Eleanor watched suspiciously as he fumbled through cooking tutorials on his phone, determined to contribute more than just money. You're Burning the onions, she observed one evening, unable to watch his struggles any longer. I thought I was caramelizing them, Jackson said sheepishly. Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. Here, move over. As they cooked together, Eleanor caught glimpses of the man she'd once loved, focused, humble, genuinely trying to learn. But she couldn't forget how easily he'd walked away before. Meanwhile, Jackson had begun developing something extraordinary in his private office. Working late into the night, he created detailed architectural plans based on Lily's drawings, affordable housing complexes that didn't sacrifice beauty for budget. He called it the Foundation Project, though he told no one about it yet. What are you working on? Lily asked one evening, finding Jackson at his drafting table. Something inspired by a very talented young architect I know, he said, showing her the blueprints. What do you think? Lily studied the plans with serious concentration. It's beautiful, but why aren't the rich people buildings ever this pretty? Jackson paused, considering her question. Because I forgot that buildings should serve people, not just profit. You reminded me of that. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, Eleanor confronted Jackson in the kitchen. I know what you're doing. What am I doing? You're trying to make us need you, making Lily think you're some kind of hero who will always be there. Jackson set down his coffee cup carefully. Is that so terrible? Wanting to be someone you can count on? Yes, when you have a history of disappearing when things get hard. Eleanor's voice shook with old pain. My father promised my mother the world, then left us with nothing. Your promises feel the same. Jackson moved closer, his voice urgent. Eleanor, I was 25 and terrified of my father. I was weak and stupid, but I'm not that person anymore. Prove it, Eleanor challenged. Because Lily's already getting attached, and I won't let you break her heart the way you broke mine. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening, 6 weeks after they'd moved into Jackson's penthouse. Eleanor had found steady work as an office manager for a nonprofit, and the rhythm of their unconventional household had begun to feel almost natural. Almost Jackson was in the kitchen, successfully preparing Lily's favorite grilled cheese sandwiches without burning them, when Lily wandered in from the living room carrying an old photo album she'd discovered on a high shelf. Jack, look what I found, she said, settling onto a bar stool with the album spread before her. Are these pictures of you when you were little? Jackson glanced over, expecting to see childhood photos his housekeeper had packed away. Instead, his blood ran cold. The album was one he'd forgotten he owned, filled with pictures from his college years, including several of him with Eleanor. Oh, he said, moving quickly toward the album, but it was too late. Lily had turned to a page featuring a large photo of Jackson and Eleanor at a college party, young and laughing, his arm around her waist as she leaned into his chest. They looked completely, obviously in love. Is this Mama? Lily asked, her voice small and confused. She looked up at Jackson with those piercing blue-gray eyes. You knew Mama before? Before the flood? Eleanor appeared in the kitchen doorway, having heard Lily's questions. When she saw the open album, her face went white. Lily, put that away, she said quickly. But Lily was already turning pages, finding more photos. Jackson and Eleanor at a restaurant, at a park. Eleanor, wearing Jackson's college sweatshirt and looking radiantly happy. You were boyfriend and girlfriend, Lily said, her voice growing stronger as understanding dawned. You loved each other. It wasn't a question. Children had an uncanny ability to recognize truth when they saw it. Eleanor and Jackson stood frozen, both realizing their carefully constructed boundaries were crumbling in real time. Why didn't you tell me? Lily continued, her voice rising with hurt and confusion. Why did you pretend you just met during the flood? Eleanor moved toward her daughter, hands outstretched. Lily, sweetheart, it's complicated. No, it's not. Lily slammed the album shut, tears starting to flow. Adults always say things are complicated when they're really just lying. Jackson felt his heart breaking as he watched Lily's trust shatter. Lily, we wanted to tell you. When? She demanded, turning those accusatory eyes on him. When were you going to tell me that you're the man who broke Mama's heart? The one who left her all alone? Eleanor gasped. She'd never told Lily those details directly, but children absorbed more than adults realized. Through fragments of overheard phone calls, whispered conversations with friends, and Eleanor's own moments of weakness, Lily had pieced together more than anyone knew. "You're him, aren't you?" Lily continued, her voice breaking. "The dreamer, who built castles in the air but didn't want to build a real family. You're my father who wasn't ready to be a father." Eleanor sank into a chair, realizing that all her careful explanations over the years had led to this moment. In trying to protect Lily from the full truth, she'd created a narrative that made this revelation inevitable and devastating. "Lily," Jackson said quietly, kneeling down to her level, "you're right. I was the man who hurt your mother. I was young and scared, and I made the worst decision of my life when I left her." Lily wiped her nose on her sleeve, studying his face. "Are you my real dad?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Eleanor closed her eyes, knowing she couldn't dodge this anymore. "No," Eleanor said softly. "But you were supposed to have a little brother or sister who would have been Jack's child. I lost that baby after he left." Jackson felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Hearing Eleanor speak about their lost child so matter-of-factly in front of Lily made the grief fresh and sharp again. "But when I found you at the shelter," Eleanor continued, "you were the same age that baby would have been, and you had that same love for drawing buildings that Jack used to have. So when I adopted you, I gave you his last name because I thought maybe it was meant to be. Maybe you were the family we were supposed to have." Lily absorbed this information with the seriousness that children bring to life-changing revelations. "So you chose me to replace the baby you lost?" "No," Eleanor said quickly, moving to embrace Lily. "I chose you because you needed a family, and I needed you. Not as a replacement for anything, but as exactly who you are. And Jack?" Lily turned to him with devastating directness. "Why did you come back? Because you felt guilty?" Jackson considered lying, giving her an easy answer that would smooth over the complicated truth. Instead, he chose honesty. "I came back because losing you and your mother was the biggest mistake I ever made," he said quietly. "I spent 10 years trying to forget that mistake by building bigger buildings and making more money. But when I met you during the flood, when I saw your drawings and your kindness and your incredible mind, I realized I'd been living half a life." "So you want us back because we make you feel better about yourself?" Lily's question was sharp, more mature than her 10 years should have allowed. "I want you back because I love you," Jackson said simply. "Both of you, not because of guilt or what I lost, but because of who you are now. Lily, you're not my biological daughter, but you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You saved my life in that flood, but more than that, you saved my soul." Lily looked back and forth between the two adults, both of whom were fighting back tears. The weight of their shared history, their mistakes and losses and desperate hopes, filled the kitchen like a living thing. "I need to think," Lily said, finally sliding off the bar stool. "I'm going to my room." Eleanor started to follow her, but Lily shook her head. "Alone, Mama. I need to think alone." After Lily's door closed, Eleanor and Jackson sat in silence, the photo album between them like evidence of a crime. "She hates me," Jackson said eventually. "She doesn't hate you," Eleanor replied, though her voice was uncertain. "She's processing. Lily's always needed time to work through big emotions." "What do we do now?" Eleanor looked at the photos scattered across the counter, images of two young people who'd believed love could conquer anything. "Now we live with the consequences of our choices, and we hope that she can forgive us for not trusting her with the truth from the beginning." Jackson picked up one of the photos, Eleanor laughing at something he'd said, her face radiant with joy and possibility. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd been braver back then?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," she admitted. "But we can't live in what-ifs, Jackson. We can only live in what is." "And what is this?" he asked, gesturing between them. Eleanor looked toward Lily's closed door, then back at Jackson. "This is two people who love the same little girl trying to figure out how to be a family without destroying each other in the process." It wasn't the answer Jackson wanted, but it was honest. And after all the lies and omissions, honesty felt like the only foundation they had left to build on. From down the hall came the sound of Lily's voice, talking quietly to herself as she worked through the biggest revelation of her young life. Both adults strained to hear her words, but they were too soft to make out. All they could do was wait, and hope that the truth, messy and painful as it was, might finally set them all free. 6 months after that difficult evening in the ITR kitchen, the Right Housing Foundation was preparing to cut the ribbon on its first affordable housing complex. The building rose elegantly against Portland's skyline, proof that beautiful architecture didn't require luxury budgets. Lily stood on the small stage, wearing her best dress and holding oversized scissors, barely able to contain her excitement. The project bore her architectural vision, refined and brought to life through Jackson's expertise and resources. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, "I'm proud to introduce the co-designer of Riverside Commons, 10-year-old Lily Jenkins."
Right!
Eleanor watched from the front row, her heart swelling with pride. Beside her, Jackson beamed as Lily explained her design philosophy to the gathered crowd, with confidence that belied her age. "I wanted to make apartments where families like mine could live without worrying about money all the time," Lily said into the microphone. "But I also wanted them to be pretty, because everyone deserves to live somewhere beautiful." The crowd applauded, but Eleanor's attention was caught by Lily's words. Families like mine. Not families like ours or poor families, but a confident claim of belonging that made Eleanor's throat tight with emotion. After the ceremony, they toured the completed units. Each apartment was modest but thoughtfully designed, with built-in storage solutions, energy-efficient appliances, and large windows that maximized natural light. Lily's influence was everywhere. In the community garden courtyard, the children's art studio, the rooftop playground. "It's perfect," Eleanor said softly, running her hand along a kitchen counter that had been designed at the ideal height for a single mother preparing meals after a long day at work. "It's a start," Jackson corrected. "We've got approval for 3 more complexes, and Lily's already sketching designs for a mixed-income community that would include single-family homes." Eleanor shook her head in amazement. "A year ago we were homeless. Now my daughter is revolutionizing affordable housing design." "Our daughter," Jackson said quietly, testing the words he'd earned the right to say. Eleanor looked at him. Really looked. Gone was the uncertain man who'd crashed into their lives during the flood. In his place stood someone who'd learned to put family before profit, who could make pancakes without burning them, who read bedtime stories with genuine enthusiasm rather than obligation. They'd moved out of the penthouse 3 months earlier, not to return to poverty but to a comfortable house in a family neighborhood. It was smaller than Jackson's previous home but infinitely warmer, filled with Lily's artwork and the accumulated detritus of daily life. School backpacks, half-finished puzzles, a kitchen table scarred from homework sessions. "Mama, Jack," Lily called from across the courtyard, where she was explaining the playground equipment to a group of children who would soon call this place home. "Come see." As they walked toward their daughter, Jackson caught Eleanor's hand. She didn't pull away. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving us this chance?" Eleanor watched Lily demonstrate how the climbing structure could become a castle, a spaceship, or whatever children's imaginations required. "Ask me in 10 years, she said, but she was smiling. The evening reception was held in the community, room Lily had insisted be included in every building. Local families mingled with city officials and foundation board members, but the real magic happened when children began playing together in the spaces designed specifically for them. Jackson found a quiet moment with Eleanor on the outdoor terrace as sunset painted the city gold. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Eleanor looked suspicious. "Jackson, we talked about this. No more expensive gifts." "It's not expensive," he promised, "but it is important." Eleanor unwrapped the package to find a simple, silver frame containing their first family photo, taken just last week in their backyard, all three of them laughing as they tried to untangle Christmas lights in preparation for the holidays. "We look happy," Eleanor observed, studying the image. "We are happy," Jackson said. "All of us, even on the hard days." And there had been hard days. Lily's nightmares about being abandoned again. Eleanor's struggles with trusting Jackson's consistency. Jackson's learning curve as he navigated the difference between being a benefactor and being a father. But they'd worked through each challenge together, building something stronger than romance or convenience. They'd built a family. Jack. "Mama." Lily appeared beside them, slightly out of breath from running. "Mrs. Martinez wants to know if we can design a building for elderly people next. She says her grandmother needs a pretty place to live too." Jackson and Eleanor exchanged a look. The kind of wordless communication that develops between people who've learned to truly see each other. "What do you think, partner?" Jackson asked Lily. "Ready for our next project?" Lily grinned, already pulling out the small sketch pad she carried everywhere. "I have some ideas." As their daughter began sketching by the light of the terrace lamps, Eleanor leaned against Jackson's shoulder. For the first time in her adult life, she felt genuinely secure, not because of money or guarantees, but because she'd finally found people who chose to stay. "You know what the best part is?" Eleanor said quietly. "What's that?" "She's not drawing castles in the air anymore," Eleanor observed, watching Lily work. "She's drawing foundations, real ones that families can build their lives on." Jackson smiled, understanding the deeper meaning. They'd all learned the difference between dreams and plans, between hoping and building. As Portland's lights began twinkling in the growing darkness, the Wright family stood together on their terrace, designing their next project and their next chapter, one careful line at a time. Sometimes, Eleanor thought, the best families aren't born. They're built brick by brick, choice by choice, until love becomes as solid and reliable as the ground beneath their feet.